Hi all. Today is the fourth live interactive session under the qualitative data coding and analysis course, and we are joined by Sandhya and Shreya, who are the faculties for this course. So, without further ado, I think I'll pass it on to Shreya to start the session. Over to you, Shreya.
Yeah, hi everyone, and welcome back. For today's session, we are going to watch a video together and learn a couple of features which we were not able to discuss in our last session. And then we will discuss some of the ways, steps, and how to generate themes. You have already learned how to generate codes and then clustering them into categories. And we will learn how to generate themes out of those categories today. And Sandhya will also explain to you a couple of other methods of qualitative analysis. And then we will also discuss some of the homeworks that we have received. So that's the agenda for today's session. So I will request Akanksha if you could play the video for us.
Sure, sure, I will. Do let me know if the sound is visible. I'm sorry, if you can hear the sound.
We do get asked from time to time about reports and about different ways you can get data out. These kind of queries tend to come in when somebody is looking for to send something to the supervisor or to a colleague to show some work that they've done. It's often the coding structure, or it's the coding content, or it's both. Now, without getting into anything complicated, you can easily send your coding structure. You can export your codebook. You can do that very easily. And that will put that out into Word, and you can include or not the number of files and references, and it will give you the structure of your codes, the names, the definitions if you've put descriptors in, and how many files and how many references are coded there. And it's a simple enough report to create and to run. So I'm just going to remove those. I'll just show you what it looks like when you put it out there. It opens it up in Word. I've just chosen one of my folders, but I could do various cycles of coding, different coding folders. So I get my codes, the child codes are indented, the descriptors are there, and I can see how much data these various codes are drawing. So that works fine. It doesn't give you the content of the codes, but it gives you the coding structure. Now, if I want the content of the codes, then I can simply take a code and I can just do export. And I can export the code straight into Word. In reference view, I'm just going to put it on the desktop. I'll include the name, I'll include the description. I can include any annotations, any relationships that I've formed, see also links or memos. I'm just going to open that on export. It'll just show you, I get a Word report that I can send out as a PDF or a Word file. And it looks pretty much like it does inside the code. There's the name, there's who it is, it's Barbara, and there's the different comments. And some was coming from audio and some was coming from text, but where the text is there, I can see it. I can also see my annotations. And they'll be displayed like endnotes at the end, so I can see linked back with hyperlinks, which annotations were there, etc. Like comments in a regular Word document. So I can do that as well, and that gives them both form and content. But sometimes people want to do a little bit more than that. They want to show the codes and the content, and they may also want to apply filters. I don't want to show every document or every code. I want to show certain codes or certain documents. And you can do that too, but that's in an area down here known as reports. So if I go down here, you'll see there's an area called reports, and there's formatted and text reports. Basically, a formatted report is the one you're most likely to use. It's already created for you. It's already formatted. So you can create your own, and you can customize these. And there's kind of standard out of the box ones here that run pretty well. So I could see a coding summary by file. So here's Barbara and here's all her codes and here's what the actual text that was coded. Or I could look at a code and see what files are in there and what comments come from each file. So with these reports, when you're creating them, I'll show you in a minute how to create one. You can create a file with, you can apply filters. You can decide, when I run this report, ask me what I want to filter on. So I can say, right, I don't want every file. I just want certain files. So I'm prompting it to prompt me to know what files to run the report on. So I don't have to just default to everything. So I'm just going to run it on Barbara. Just to keep life, well, I'll do it on 2. I'll do it on Charles as well, just to keep life simple. And I can also tell it, now I can filter by users and dates, but I'm more interested in the codes. I don't want every code. I just want to see those 2 transcripts, and I want to see them in the attitudinal codes. Now, obviously, I can select the whole folder. I can select everything if I want, but I'll just take positive and negative again, just to keep the example simple. And this is what I get. I get a report, and it opens up in this report reader, and you can see I've got report maps and thumbnails, so it looks a bit like a PDF, like they would be bookmarks on a PDF. So I'm just going to switch off the thumbnails. Maybe that'll make life a bit easier. There's my report name and my date and the information that I want to see in the report. And on this little report map here, I can see there's Barbara and there's Charles, my 2 documents. And there's the codes for each of those. Again, not every code, but the ones I've chosen to include. It could be everything. So there's the negative comments from Barbara. And there's the positive comments from Barbara. So I'm seeing the code. I'm seeing that there's 5 references in the code from her. And I can see the actual comments as well. And you can have things like summaries at the end if I want to. I can put in the institutional logo, the name of the team. I can have dates and report names, etc., department names, whatever I want to include in here, I can include. And these are useful for if you're regularly sending out information. You know, if I'm going to be regularly sending out information to people, funders, PIs, supervisors, I can send out last week's coding, last month's coding, my colleague's coding, you know, certain codes, one cycle of coding, but not the second one that we're still halfway through. So all that kind of, it's very convenient. And finally, once I have these, I can just export that out into any of those formats. That's a doc, but I can put it out as an Excel file, an RTF, or even on a HTML file if I wanted to share it on a, via a web browser. So I'll just save it out there on the desktop so you can see what it looks like. So it puts it out. Now it looks pretty much exactly the same. If I go out onto the desktop, there's my coding summary in Word. So if I open that up, I should be able to see it. And it's going to look pretty much the same as it did. I don't have the navigation view because I'm not inside NVivo anymore, but I have everything else. There's my positive and negative comments. And I can see, this kind of information at the start of each document, each code, the number of references, the number of references, the referencing number, who coded it and when it was modified. Now I may or may not want all that information. I can include it or exclude it in my report. So you can build these reports with a wizard. They're reasonably straightforward to do. I probably should do a separate video for that because building one is not quite the same and customizing one isn't quite the same as running them. But this one would get you what a lot of people want and what they ask us for. And I just noticed today, because I was asked this question today, that there's not a lot of stuff on the web in terms of videos about this. So I thought it'd be easier just to put it out as a how-to video. But also we'll do another one then on creating these or customizing them if you wanted to make your own, but we might do that as a separate recording. Okay, I hope that's somewhat helpful.
Thanks, Akanksha. So, like you all saw, you can generate reports after you have coded your data. So I hope the video helped you to understand the steps of how to generate a report in the from the NVivo after you have coded your data. We will also share this link with you in Moodle so that you can revisit if you need to go back and uh, check the video and generate your own report. So I would like to request Akanksha if you could share our presentation. So we will be moving into our presentation where we will talk and learn about how to generate themes out of codes.
Is it visible, Shreya?
Yes, it is. Well, so I wanted to start by discussing some of the principles of qualitative data analysis. And this was laid down in this paper by Bryman and Burgess. So the first is people differ in their experience and understanding of reality. So this is one of the core basic principles of qualitative data analysis. And you should remember this because qualitative research, it assumes that there is no single truth and that different people will interpret a single event or a single situation based on their own background, emotions, relationships, and social position, which is what we spoke to you about in when we started our classes, and we told you how a researcher's reflexivity needs to be played down. So this is a constructivist approach where I mean, the how you understand the data and understand the social phenomena is varies from one researcher to the other researcher. The second is social phenomena cannot be understood outside of its own context. So all the human actions makes sense only when you understand the setting that they are occurring in. So it's not a secluded or siloed incident. It you need to look at it from the point of where the culture around it, the norms, the relationships that it has, the constraints it might have, and also the history that might have shaped them. So, for example, maternal health behavior, if we are to look at in rural Telangana, it cannot be analyzed properly without considering family dynamics, how they access transport, the caste or religious norms, the roles of the ashas, and also other several village level realities that exist. The third is qualitative research can be used to describe a phenomena or generate theory grounded in the data, which is grounded theory. And we have been discussing grounded theory for in our classes. So the qualitative analysis basically can do two major things. First is describe what is happening, what is occurring in that phenomena or the particular thing that you're looking at. The second thing that it can do is build theory from the data that you have gathered and you are analyzing. So you identify patterns, mechanisms, rather than imposing other pre-existing theories. This is grounded theory, but you can also analyze a data based on existing theories. And this is what we spoke to you about when we discussed deductive and inductive ways of coding and analyzing your data. The fourth is understanding human behavior, that it emerges slowly and non-linearly. So what I basically mean by this is uh, you don't grasp the meaning of people's experiences on the first read, and that's what we mentioned about uh, you know uh, you analyze the data in a loop in an iterative manner. So the insights develop gradually, and as you repeatedly revisit this data and you compare the cases, you refine the codes and then you test your interpretations. And it does not end there. You try to understand different interpretations of that thing and you finalize it. The process does involve looping back rather than moving in a very straight line. So, the fifth one is the exceptional cases that you may find in your data or in your inquiry. It may be a reflection of the problem or the new idea that you are able to find in that data and the analysis. So, in qualitative data and coding, we do not ignore the outliers, and that's a very important part of qualitative coding. So, if you find any single unusual case, it is something that you don't ignore, saying that okay, it's not going to be important for me to look at it because it's not aligning with the majority of the tendency of the data, but rather you try to dig in deeper and look for hidden mechanisms, some of the overlooked barriers, and then you look for contradictions in the common assumptions in that data. You can find new angles to it. So summarizing this, the odd case is not always, it's not something that you ignore when you are doing your qualitative data coding and analysis. If you can move to the next slide. Thank you. So, how do you identify patterns and complex relationships? So, when you are analyzing in-depth interviews, suppose with a PHC staff, ASHAs, or a pregnant women about managing your high-risk pregnancies, you have several codes and code families that you generate, and you start clustering them in different manners. So you have generated codes, and then you generate categories out of that codes. So when I say cluster, it is the category that you are generating from these codes. So, for example, if you see the doctor, there is one code that you have assigned, which is doctor is unavailable. The PHC is closed early. There are referral delays. And then there is the ambulance was unresponsive. So these form a category or a cluster, which is a system level constraint in accessing healthcare. Similarly, in the second cluster or category, you can see that there are codes, ASHAs hesitant to label high risk pregnancies, their fear of being blamed, uncertain about app alerts, pressure from families not to refer. And this forms into a larger category. You have created a cluster which basically speaks about the ashas, how they mediate these challenges. So that becomes your category. The third is this is the third example where you have codes like downplaying the risks, seeking second opinions, advice from elders overrides the ashas, avoidance of hospital due to past experiences. And this together, these independent codes together come together, and you can cluster them and categorize them as women's response to risk communication. So, deeper cross-level relationships becomes visible when you start making clusters or categories of these codes. And where you can see the first one is system level unreliability. Then you see what shapes Asha's behavior. Then you can see, say, shapes how these different things are shaping women's perception, and then this together is the influences that you have in the care seeking choices. So you can see, I mean, this interaction is not a linear way. There can be overlapping spaces. So, but then the idea is you bring this code together, but you also have your research questions and objectives in your mind. You make a category out of this, you make a cluster out of this, and that is the first level of you being able to generate a theme. So suppose, for example, when I said that you don't ignore the outliers in qualitative data, suppose there are two exceptional villages where the PHC ran very efficiently. The Ashas were more confident, more assertive in counseling, and the high risk pregnancy in women were reported clearly, understanding of the risks. Despite the similar socioeconomic conditions, you look at both the conditions and you try to compare and analyze what exactly is going on, and also analyze these two cases differently. And so, finally, coming back to the categories, when you lay down these clusters and categories together, you finally are able to understand that there are structural constraints that influence Asha's behavior, which then shapes the woman's or the patient's interpretation and action. So this becomes a theme. This is a finding you have from these sets of clusters. All right. So, Akanksha, if you could please go to the next slide. So there are some of these steps we have discussed this in the past. I might be repeating a few of them. So you have learned how to code the data. You have learned how to identify patterns. You look for similarities, you look for differences, you look for recurring ideas across codes, but you also keep into consideration some idea or some phenomena which is not which is an outlier. You include that as well. Then you group these codes into categories, like categories or clusters related to these codes, and you pull them in a bucket. So again, for example, you have no transport, you have long distance, rainy season barriers. This together implies that there was some sort of an issue related to the access. So you cluster them or categorize them as access barriers. The second one is Asha's didn't visit. There was no follow-ups, missed home visits. And when you look at all these codes and you are able to bring them in the same bucket, it tells you that there was an issue with the outreach. So one thing that you have to remember that at this stage, you are not interpreting the data deeply, you are mostly sorting it, but also taking into consideration that you're looking for these patterns and you're looking for these relationships, which is a very important thing in qualitative data coding and analysis. So Akanksha, if you can move to the next slide, please. Yeah. Then you interpret these categories or the codes you have done. So once you have grouped these similar codes into categories, the next step for you is to think beyond that surface. So you ask, what you actually do is you ask questions, and you ask these I mean, you start with asking these questions, which helps you to dig deeper into these categories and understand them in a better manner. So you ask questions like, what does this cluster or categories of experiences reveal about these people's realities? What kind of mechanisms or deeper idea does this category point towards? You might find something similar, which would then, something that relates to in that category. Like, for example, if we talk about access to barriers to access. Any barriers to accessing the healthcare. So there are different barriers clustered together into a category where we call it as access barriers. But there can be another category where you talk about issues with distance. Okay. And you know that there is a relationship. You can draw that relationship between distance. The distance of the women's villages from the main district hospital. So that is also an access barrier, but that is also an issue with the distance of how much of a reach the healthcare has. So there are, if you can see, these are not a very linear and straightforward relationships. These are or patterns. These are very complex. So you start by asking these questions: what mechanisms or deeper insights are available in this category? The other thing that you can ask is, why is this important for you to understand? So again, if I give you a quick example, another one, if a category contains codes like long distance, no transport, road blocked, then the deeper idea might be pointing towards systemic mobility barriers, not only transportation issues. Okay, if that makes sense. So the fifth one is how you develop these themes. You explain that themes are, the themes are not just summaries of these categories and codes that you have worked with. These are interpretations of these interpretations from the data, the codes and the categories that you have generated. So themes are the bigger insights, the ideas that explain what's going on and why it matters. So the codes are the building blocks, themes are the concepts that hold that meaning. Okay. So suppose, going back to the example, access barriers, the theme is structural constraints that limit timely maternal care. That is a theme. So you have identified the fundamental cause of access barrier, and that becomes your theme. Then the second one, we spoke about the weak outreach, right? The theme is implementation gaps that undermine continuity of care. If the distance is very far, there is the outreach is weak. What is the interpretation of that? How is it affecting that mechanism? It is the implementation gap which affects the continuity of care. This is how you generate the themes. But then on the sixth one, you keep refining and validating this. Like I said, this is not a linear path. This is a non-linear path where you come back and make iterative changes. You make interpretations at every stages. So you keep asking these questions even after you have generating these themes, that whether these themes actually make sense in the data. Is it answering the questions that you are looking for? Do these themes overlap too much? Are they distinct? Or you can categorize them differently or have additional themes generating out of it. Do they fit with what participants actually said? Do they answer your research questions? So these are you are as long, when you are coding, categorizing and generating themes, you are also continuously asking these questions. So again, the patterns and the relationships that you will find in the qualitative data is complex, and this comes with practice, and the more you involve yourself into understanding what the data is pointing towards. So that is analysis. Okay. So in this refining and validating stage, you also sometimes adjust and readjust, merge themes, and also separate them. So this brings in more rigor into your work.
I will just talk about understanding the themes in relation to the research question. Now, it's extremely important that you have a theory. So, when you're writing up your answer, I mean, your research, you're interpreting your data and all of that, you should have a very clear theory with based on which you are doing this. And one was what Shreya, in fact, just now described the whole thing is grounded theory. We had talked about this also in our very first class. Remember, we had talked about open coding, Excel coding, and selective coding. We had taken the example of work from home culture and how it's intruding into our personal space and how we are struggling to set boundaries. So that was all the grounded theory. And even what Shreya just talked about in the whole of this morning was grounded theory. But there are two other ways in which we can also do it. And I will give a disclaimer, neither have Shreya or I ever used this. So we will strongly recommend that you go back to the papers that we will share after this class, read it up. They're very simply but very well written with examples. Chapter 1 talks about the methods, and chapter 2 takes one single transcript and uses all the three methods to show how the coding and developing of themes is done. So the second method is qualitative content analysis. It's used very widely, especially when you want to elicit meaning from a text. And now, with technological advancement, there are softwares which actually enable you to do this. It's very good and recommended for exploratory studies. And the software actually allows you to create a master code before you code, and then you have subcodes that emerge from it. And then, as Shreya said, if something does not fit into the norm, it is an outlier, this takes care of that as well. So there is this category called free node where you can code data and put the data there that doesn't fit into the rest of your existing codes. So this also gives you one opportunity to try and make sense of data that is an outlier, that is not fitting in with the rest of the pattern that you have. Can we move to the next slide, please? And the third one is called the narrative analysis. So this can be applied to any form of textual data. It could be a diary, a field diary. It could be the journals that you take notes on. It could be a written incident of any critical incident that the researcher might have come upon. And the main function of the narrative analysis is that you think of stories and you focus on the potential that a story has. So we are all human beings, are great storytellers. In fact, we give meanings to our life through stories. Like if you ask anyone for one description, they will give you a story around it, usually. So when you treat your data as stories, it really helps. And usually, any story you will see has a beginning, it has a middle, and then it has an end. And through all this, there is one single plot, a core plot, a main thing that the narrator wants to convey through their story. So, in narrative analysis, what we are trying to do is arrive at this core story. What is it? What is a core story? What is this trying to tell us? And we do this by deleting, first of all questions and comments that the interviewer has made during the course of the transcript or during the course of the interview. And then you read the remaining text. Then you keep deleting words that are distracting you from the main core theme and phrases. And then you will come up with what they are calling subplots. So these are fragments of your main plot. And then you stitch these subplots together to get one coherent core story. Then you return to the story and you go back to the participant. So in this, you actually take the story that you have gathered from reading of that particular transcript back to your respondent and you ask them, okay, look, this is what I understood. Is this your core story? And you give the respondent a chance to either correct it or to help you develop it further. So, this is what narrative analysis is. And if you go to the next slide, the two references are there that we will be sharing with you. As I said, the first part underpins the theoretical issues. So, it talks about these three methods in great detail: the grounded theory, the narrative analysis, and what was the second one? The content analysis, right? So all three of them And then it takes one single transcript. I think it's a nurse who is who talks about her experiences of getting somebody to quit from smoking and analyzes it using these three um, theories. So it's a good read. We will share it on Moodle. Please go through it. And if any one of you have used either of the other two methods and would like to pitch in, this is a great time to do it.
Yeah, so I would also like to add to what Sandhya has been explaining. Narrative analysis is something that you use very commonly when you are writing case studies. Okay, so that is something which is very common. And you basically, what Sandhya said, it's about a story. And also, when it is content, qualitative content analysis, it was, we already have quantitative content analysis where you assign, you count the frequency of keywords throughout your content. So that is quantitative. But when it is qualitative content analysis, it's more about, in grounded theory, the main difference is in grounded theory, you try to assign more meaningful, more analyzed codes to it. But in qualitative content analysis, you just assign a reduced understanding of each paragraph or each set of information, and you start condensing and reducing the amount of data that you have. So grounded theory, when you do grounded theory, you analyze from the beginning and from the start, like when you are assigning codes. But in qualitative content analysis, you start with reducing the amount of data that you have. Like you have a set of you have a paragraph, you are assigning, you are reducing these paragraphs to a couple of keywords. So that's how you do qualitative content analysis, and the next stages would be analyzing those. Sandhya, I think you need to
You're unmuted.
Yeah, yeah. So in grounded, it's like, you have the bricks and then you build the building. But in the other way, it is the reverse. So you break down to then identify the key elements or the key phrases that you have. Okay.